Hi, I'm Nikki Flynn, and this is a video on getting into mine Edwin's heads as casting directors. I'm just going to jump right in with the really boring one, and that being reputation and attitude. Um, we don't want to work with divas, and I definitely don't want to direct somebody who cannot take honest criticism that is not attacking them. I can't direct you if you can't understand that sometimes you don't do things perfectly the first time, or that to us it doesn't really fit whatever it is you're trying to do with the rest of the audio, what have you. There's a reason why we're asking you to do a retake, and if your ego's going to get in the way of that, it's going to make it very difficult to work with you. And if we ever have that experience, I'm probably not going to want to work with you again, and that will color whether or not we really want to cast you if you audition for our project, no matter how good of an actor you are. Basically, we can always find somebody who isn't a spoiled, rotten brat who is in that same voice range and can coax better acting out of them through direction instead of having to deal with your attitude. If that doesn't apply to you, fantastic. Definitely audition for us. Um, Other than just that, if you're known for being like weird and eliciting like creepy recordings from people using projects as a guise to get close to whatever your preferred gender is and trying to take advantage of them in that way, we also want nothing to do with you. And we do talk to our voice actors and our friends who dabble in voice acting, and we pay attention to the people who are known as creepers in the community, and we avoid them at all costs. If that also doesn't apply to you, fantastic. You're probably a decent human being. Um, and then off of what I said is the really boring part of it, and on to the other stuff. I'd already asked a couple of our actors if we could talk about them, and they all gave me the green light to do that. So I'm going to mention them and explain some of the stuff it is that they did really well with regards to what we think goes into a really good audition. And a couple of them have been cast for like with us multiple times. So obviously they're doing something really right. So getting into character, we know that as an actor you have to do that, and we try to give you as concise of a description as possible so that with 3 lines you can show us your interpretation of a character. And if you're not reading that, including the voice type that we want, then you're not going to be giving us what we want, and we're not going to seriously consider your audition, no matter how good of an actor you are, if you aren't reading and seeing that your voice is not in the range for that character. So as I said, the actors already said we could talk about them, and so Simon DLC reads really well. That is a very low tier compliment, and I know that, but I'm going to explain it further, especially with comparing his performance and someone else's performance for this explanation to make more sense. Okay, so he voices our God of Fears, Barbas, and the other god that I'm going to have you compare him to briefly is Praemod. He is voiced by Vince Fallow, and both Simon DLC and Vince Fallow are amazing, wonderful actors, and they gave us exactly what we wanted for those characters. Basically, with Praemod, he knows by now, Vince definitely knows, like, he's mischievous and mysterious and a little bit, like, sultry, and it's a weird mixture of that, and every time he performs as Praemod, he brings that, and it's exactly what we wanted, and it's always what we want. And Vince has become one of our one-take wonders, where he can just immediately get into Praemod like that, and just immediately all of his lines are in the same document, and he will absolutely nail it. Or if he can't decide between takes, I think one time he has given me like 2 or 3 takes of one line, but everything else was just his first take, and it was perfect. But the comparison point for these two is that they both have reprised their roles to do a quest video, and Praemod's and Barbas's are, I think, about the same length word-wise, like word count-wise, the scripts for them that they had read for to make the video. And what we asked for with Barbas was for a soft voice and a delivery that was very slow and deliberate. And how deliberate is it? Well, those same length scripts, Vince's video as Praemod is about, I think it's like 2 minutes and 9 seconds, and Barbas's from Simon DLC voicing him was, I think, like 4 minutes and 8 seconds, so almost twice as long with the same amount of words, roughly. Basically, that's how deliberately he speaks as Barbas, and definitely listen to those videos to hear what it is that I'm talking about, because their performances are always stellar for those gods, and we are always happy when we get to message them and say, hey, we have something with this guy, we want you to reprise them, and they have always agreed so far. But regardless, that whole Simon DLC reads well thing, he, for all of his auditions, regardless of if he was cast or not, he wrote what we wanted and he gave it to us. And that seems like voice acting 101, but if you actually really read things and then even try to put a little of your own spin on them is perfectly fine with us. One thing that Simon did was that he gave Barbas a little bit like edging onto like creepy and sinister without making it sound like I am clearly voicing a villain. And that to us was amazing, and that helped him stand out above everybody else who didn't really take the deliberate speaking into consideration. He also did do deliberate speaking in a more extreme way than most people did, since he basically slows his speech down to half rate compared to everybody else who they probably slowed it down to actually enunciate more slowly. And that was the biggest change for a lot of them whenever they were auditioning for Barbas versus one of the other males on the call. So as I said, I know that's a really low tier compliment, but now that I've explained it and explained what it is about that helps his performance and is part of the reason why he gets cast for us a fair amount of the time, is because he does read and he does exactly what we ask him to do as an auditioner every time. And if you read things relatively well and give us your spin on them, you're going to stand out the same way that he does to us. With Vince and his, aside from just Praemod being exactly what we pictured Praemod sounding like, and Vince just embodying that incredibly well, he had another one where he was another character who was a coward. And one of the things that really made him stand out as a coward was that he could actually get to this really high-pitched, squeaky, squeeing, oh God, what just happened to me voice. And he was the only one who really took it to that extreme, and that definitely stood out among the others. It was something that we both really enjoyed listening to, and if we really enjoy listening to it, or it makes us laugh, or something like that, obviously it's going to be more memorable than everybody else that we're just sitting there nodding going, oh yeah, this is a solid audition. And he did that so well, and in the final product for Curse of the Blight, you can hear that as well, just that he took Coward to the furthest extreme, and we loved it, and we used, I believe, all of his first takes for that one too, because Vince is amazing like that. But otherwise, the whole just general reading, and we do put a lot of effort into these descriptions, and we know what it is that we want and what we're talking about when it comes to our characters. We write them, we know how we think they should sound. You're free to disagree with us if you think that we picked the wrong voice type for them. Have your own opinion, but again, we're the writers and we're also the casting directors. I'm the director, so we really do have final say, regardless of your opinion. But moving on from that, and the whole just definitely read thing, I would say to definitely put your best audio forward, period. Using Audacity or whatever program you use, if you're just going to record yourself saying the lines just all in a row and then go through and listen and say, okay, like this one and this one are my best takes of line one and so on, and put them in their own document and submit them to us, perfectly fine. It does allow you to cut out any mistakes if you accidentally bumped your mic and so on and so forth, and that will make you sound a lot more professional in the long run. We don't really mind it as much, except it may start to annoy us a little when we have like 200 auditions to get through and yours is like 8 minutes long and we can't skip through it to get through the silence and mic bumps and such to actually hear your audition because you took like a 3-minute pause between each line or something like that, or that you gave us like 200 takes. Definitely 2 to 4, if you want to give more than one, is the ideal, because we actually get an idea of your range at that point and just how well you can follow direction. We do put those direction tags in there for a reason. And definitely pay attention to them. The reason they're there is because we want to know that you can voice act. We want to hear the difference between your normal voice as this character and your emoted voice as this character. And if you're monotone throughout, or just your normal voice and your excited voice sound exactly the same, you're just not as stellar an auditioner as the people who do read that and at least try, even if they're not exactly what we're looking for at that point for that character. And for that whole emoting thing, this other person said I can talk about her, and so Embrin. Whenever she auditioned for CL, we thought she was just a really great fit and a really phenomenal actor for this character. And then I grew to appreciate her as an actor more as the audio engineer, going through and listening to things, making sure it sounds about right with pauses and conversation and such. And I do that for every single one, so I hear people's voices a lot, and that's how they get stuck in my head, and I know what they sound like when I'm writing their character reprisal. But regardless, for her, she did really well with CL because she knew the character from the description, and she brought the whole self-taught mage who's still learning and wants to learn more about magic to the table really well in her audition, as well as just a really solid voice for her. And as I was working on it and compiling the entirety, which it's basically one really long scene instead of being several smaller scenes like most of our others are, she starts off with just, okay, let's try this, in what she tries to summon a god to give him an answer. And it doesn't work, and they keep going and summoning more gods in an attempt to get their answers. And the more they summon more gods that don't give them their answer, the more the party themselves gets incredibly frustrated. And I feel like she did really well with understanding that her frustration is going to become more and more and more as time goes on, and things aren't going their way. And she still did that really well, along with the emoting direction that we gave her in the script. And the fact that she was able to do that was just absolutely stellar, and she is so great at this. And she, one of our other actresses who said I could talk about her, they're really good at another thing in particular, and that is knowing their limits. They know where their voice sits, how far their range extends, and they do not audition outside of that. That goes a little bit into that whole reading thing, but definitely if you know, like, I'm a relatively deep-voiced woman, I would not be going for the high-pitched voices unless I am very practiced in warming up for them and my voice can actually achieve them without me straining to stay there. And both Don Rosanna and Embrin, they both do that incredibly well. They both immediately know, this is where my voice is, this is where I'm comfortable acting, and even if I'm typecasting myself, I'm still going to audition for the things that I know will reflect my voice and that I can actually do well without stepping so far out of my comfort zone that I'm up the creek without a paddle. And that is something, especially if you're starting out just relatively new, fledgling voice acting, just definitely stay within your comfort zone and slowly edge out instead of just immediately trying to spring into a completely new area that you are not practiced for. Definitely work toward extending your range if that's something that you want to do, and your voice control and so on, because we have several voice actors there who are just phenomenal with their range and their ability to go from being a relatively high tenor to having an almost impossibly like bottomless pit deep of a voice. And for some of them, that's pretty close to their natural speaking voice at that. So they're very practiced and quite talented, and there are just so many of them, and I don't have permission to just name drop all of them. But those are some of the things that definitely make the actors that we have cast before stand out from the ones who gave me permission to talk about them. Is that they do what we ask them to really well, like what Simon DLC and Vince Valla did for their gods characters. And again, for the other two, for the two female actors that I'd mentioned, they are really good at staying within range and also bringing to the table what it is we asked for. If we asked for just a little bit sultry or something like that, like we did with Preeti and Dawn voices Preeti, do a little bit sultry and don't necessarily assume that going over the top is always going to be the answer. If you feel comfortable doing it, you can listen to the other people who've auditioned so far for a role you're considering and see what takes they've done and see how you can differentiate yourself from them. If you're not comfortable with that sort of thing, definitely don't do it because you might psych yourself out. If you're comfortable with yourself and your acting ability and your voice, and you think you could still do a really good audition for us after hearing some incredibly stellar actors' performances, then by all means, listen to your competition and figure out a way to make yourself stand out, seem different. An example might be that you take your own interpretation of one of our direction lines. So if you see embarrassed, even if you're not correct with our script in what they're embarrassed about, but you see it and you're like, maybe they're talking to their crush. Okay, they're talking to their crush. What's going to happen when you're talking to your crush? Or you maybe think about somebody that you have a crush on while you're trying to work through the lines. And think about them talking to you about something and how flustered you're going to get and that little bit of flush of color that hits your cheeks and that you're starting to get a little bit tongue-tied. And so your embarrassed line, even if it's incorrect with the context of the script, since we only give you like 3 lines to work with, if that, it's still going to be, if everybody else just took it as just like sound a little bit shy, but you took it as sound shy and stutter a little bit and kind of trip over your words a tiny bit for in character, and you gave us just a toned down read like everybody else had done, and your second take is you going, of course, instead of, of course. Like, one of those is a little bit more emotive than the other, and it does give us an idea that you knew to sound embarrassed, but that you know that there's a range of embarrassment to sound like. So doing anything like that, as I said, only if you're comfortable and you're not going to completely psych yourself out if you listen to other people's really stellar auditions. Because we do have so many of them, and it disappoints me that we can't cast all of you because so many of you are just absolutely wonderful and have made our top 5 list multiple times. What that actually means is that as soon as we get our first audition, we listen to it. We make notes on it, and that can include your audio quality, your performance, whether or not you actually read the line, and how much emoting you actually do, that sort of stuff. We both make notes of it, and if you actually paid attention to the voice type we want, for instance. And we do that for every single auditioner, every single character they audition for. And we pick out our cast by, after the closing, we make sure that we have listened to everything, read our own and the others' feedback, and then we individually make what is roughly a top 5 list of our favorite performers for those characters. And we do this separately without actually collaborating, and then after we each have a top 5, we basically bring our note cards to the table and we actually look and are like, okay, how much crossover do we have? Because if we have like one person who's the sole crossover, there's a pretty good chance that person is by far the most standout performer. And that's the idea, especially whenever we're looking at like 200, 300, 400 auditions all together, and you're talking like 200 auditions for a particular character, you have got to whittle that down. And so we try to get as nitpicky and exactly what we did and did not like about you, what we actually think we can reel in and that we cannot make you just bring more of and amplify. Like, we actually talk all that up about the context of the script and the little bit of context of the script that you have from those 3 lines. And that's really watering down just how much effort we really put into this and our discussions that go into it. But all of this with the performance that I've been talking about for several minutes now, that is all stuff that we think about as casting directors, as well as just, I would say, your audio quality. It does mean a lot to us, and I did want to explain a little bit why. Basically, we would love for people to be proud of being part of one of our projects, and when they're actually applying for additional jobs or showing to agencies, yeah, I'm a voice actor and I'm looking for representation, to actually show some of our works and say, I am this character in this, and being able to say, like, this is on my resume. Yes, excitedly, I was part of this and it was awesome and it's so much fun. Like, we want people to actually feel that way, even if it's not within genre for them. We definitely want them to be proud of this. And because we don't have a studio and have you all using the same mic and otherwise the general same equipment in the same room to have it be a uniform sound, the best way to do that is to have you have a good setup, a good mic, and for us to have to do as little processing of all the audio as possible. Because overly processed audio sounds incredibly bad. It does. A little bit at a time isn't too bad. Like, if you just one time normalize, one time compress, that's not going to sound awful. But if you have to keep doing it, or if you say already normalized and compressed your audio and then gave it to me, and then to make everything sound even in my final document of the entirety of the audio, do it, yours is going to sound really weird. And that's especially true if we have to clean stuff up for you. So definitely listen to what you submit, because you might not have noticed that your mic caught your neighbor's dog barking or something and just have to do like line 3 one time again, versus us being like, oh, okay, you didn't bother to listen and hear that in this 18 seconds of audio there's also a dog barking. That seems like you didn't really care, or that you were really, really hasty with it. And if you're going to be hasty like that, can we really trust you to take our script seriously and actually get into character, stay there, and bring to the audio fiction what it is we want to hear? And also, with regards to that, if you are cast, do not just read your character's lines. We give you the entirety of the script for a reason instead of just say these 12 lines, because we want you to have the context of the entire scene. We want you to actually think about it in the sort of way of, you're all on stage performing these characters, and your performance is going to elicit emotions out of another actor present, and their performance is going to do the same to you. And based on the direction we give you in the script, can you do that? Would that be your reaction if you were watching this hypothetical play? And that is always something to think about, is what are you trying to get out of your scene partners? What are you supposed to be getting from them? And while you have the very limited information of what's in the script, not exactly how your scene partners are going to be taking each individual line, unless you guys actually have been like Discord communicating and we don't know about it yet and actually running lines together, which would be cool. But regardless, unless you've been doing that, you don't really know exactly what it is they're bringing to the table. And so you have to act as the character with the assumption that they're also going to be really good at eliciting those responses from you. Like, are they going to deliver their line in such a way that you're going to become incredibly angry and short with them? Make that assumption that they are, and also make the assumption that they're immediately going to pick up on they pissed you off. And that's definitely one reason we do give you the entirety of the script. So read the entirety of the script, because if you have a context for what's going on, it does help with the tone, and it does help you with understanding exactly how the scene is supposed to flow and what we want out of you and the other actors. And definitely, too, we hope you're a little bit entertained reading it, because we have fun writing them, and we've gotten positive feedback for our writing, so definitely consider it like a freebie glimpse into our writing style, and hopefully a little bit entertaining, especially with some of the more subtle humor that I know a handful of people had gotten in Curse of the Blight, and I don't know if everybody had gotten some of those, or even like the humor that's actually in like Cosmic Intervention, in which I don't really want to spoil it, but there is a little bit of humor to be had with Pramod and the other gods and their reactions to the mortals, and their reactions at the very end, like that end of that scene where it's just the gods talking. There are just certain little things here and there that I'm not entirely sure, like I think it might have been too subtle, but regardless, if you actually read through the script because you were cast and you actually saw it, and you got to see some of our like more subtle humor, and we hope to entertain even you guys whenever you are cast. Trying to think if there was just anything else at all. We don't mind if you mess up, including with pronunciations. Some people will. Absolutely, some people will be incredibly bothered by it, but we don't hold it against you. If you don't know how this Russian name is supposed to be pronounced with a Russian accent, we're not going to hold it against you. If you don't know we intend you to roll your R when you're saying this particular character name or this place name, we're not going to hold it against you. We're really not. As I said, other people might, but we won't. If you mess up in your audio, I would say definitely cut it out. Like, it can be really cute and endearing to hear you guys like stammering through stuff, but it does take up some of our time, and when we have like 200 other auditions to listen to, you're like 10 seconds of like yelling at yourself for getting tongue-tied is 10 seconds we could be using on another audition at that point, or deliberating about your performance. If you are reprising for us and you know us and know, like, okay, I've been cast 27 times, and you're just trying to do it all in like one take, one continuous go, and you have a line fumble in there, we're not going to hold that against you. But for your audition audio, definitely cut that stuff out. Um, and also, I do try to make it hard for the narrator because we want the absolute best of the best. We want this orator to be amazing. We want you to have a great cadence, great pronunciation, and a consistent speaking tone. And that's why if you ever look at the narrator lines, that is why they look so difficult, because I intend them to be. The other characters, I try to pick the emoted lines to hear the difference between your speaking voice and your emoted voice. But also, I do occasionally put in some things to trip people up to see if they will actually go look up how something is supposed to be pronounced. And I think maybe 3 people had done that for the one line that's in my mind right now, which was sublunary. And I know that it's something that gave the actor trouble whenever she got the final script and was working through her lines, because she had like 6 or 7 different takes of trying to say sublunary. Um, and it's just a word that's not used very often because I like SAT words and I'm a dork like that. But also, uh, and I know this isn't going to completely alleviate anxieties, even though we are the gatekeepers, we don't want you to fear us as gatekeepers. We definitely do a lot better with directing you, and we definitely work together better whenever you know you can come to us with a problem. And so part of the reason that I'm doing like these videos and why I goof off on the writing Twitter is because I want you to see us as people. And if you've gotten this far into the video, congratulations. I'm sorry I rant and ramble and jump around, but that is me. We definitely want you to be able to come to us whenever you're having problems, and the actors who we've cast multiple times, and especially when something has come up, like we cast them right as they got a really bad head cold, that sort of thing has come up several times for us. And the people who are mature and communicate that sort of stuff with us promptly, instead of waiting until like the day things are due to say, oh, by the way, I've been sick for 3 days, I'm probably going to need another like 3 or 4 days before I'm better. Oh, we tend to view you a lot more favorably if you actually come to us immediately with these kinds of problems and actually talk to us about why you need a line extension or what have you. And that's just something else to kind of bear in mind with this, is that if you're mature and you see us as approachable, which we definitely want you to, then you're going to be more likely to be somebody that we would consider working with again. It's happened for several of our actors, at least one of whom I know we still work with on occasion when we cast him. And that to us is just, okay, you're mature and you're mature enough to see this as a professional courtesy. And again, I understand that sometimes it's really anxious to start a conversation with a casting director or director about something like that that has come up, because you're worried you're going to get fired. And the only people that we have fired have been absolutely impossible. One person actually stopped outright communicating with us and giving us lines, like for like 2 months, I think it was. It was a pretty long time. And if you're not going to do that, then great. You're already more mature than at least one person that we had attempted to work with before. And of course, I know, once again, this isn't going to immediately make you think, okay, I can definitely message Nikki and Edwin and say, hey, I just got sick and these lines are due in 2 weeks. I want to do a good job, but I'm worried. And that sort of thing comes up, and we understand that absolutely. We're all human, we make mistakes, and we have bad luck. But otherwise, if you guys have any other questions or want me to go into detail about anything else that I've ranted on in this video, feel free to ask us, add us, tweet at us, as I just said, message us on Twitter, Casting Call Club, comment on the video, what have you. Just, I'm more than happy to answer these kinds of questions. One of the other things that makes people stand out is to actually ask us questions that aren't fishing for how am I standing compared to other auditioners. For one thing, we don't actually rank you guys until after things have closed, and that's also a very personal thing for me and Edwin, because our lists do not always match up 100%. I think that has only happened like 2 times period, where we both agree that the top 5 performers were these people for these characters. And asking us questions shows that you take an interest in our work, as well as that you actually take the actual performing portion seriously. And we've had now 6 people, period, out of the, like, how many is it? Like 800 or so auditioners that we have worked with, give or take a few repeats. Out of that many, we've had like 6 people ever ask us any questions at all. And that weren't trying to fish for where am I standing compared to everybody else. And that kind of shows us, as I said, that you actually take this seriously, but also know that if it's fishing for the stuff, we're going to tell you outright, we're not going to answer this question for you because it will give you an advantage, and we don't give feedback during the auditioning process. But one person, he did not get cast as the character that he was asking about, but he basically just wanted to know if his interpretation of the character's personality was accurate to how the character is portrayed in the stories that he exists in. And things like that, like checking in with, is my interpretation of this correct? We will gladly answer for you. And we will also gladly answer other questions like, okay, how often do you guys write, like, with this character? Things like that. We can definitely talk about that with you. But back to the whole, like, ending the video thing, since that just popped into my mind out of nowhere. Again, if you're one of our actors and you're cool with us talking about, like, why you were cast and things that we really like about your performances, definitely let us know. The 4 actors that we had mentioned being, I had mentioned on behalf of both of us, so we there, being Vince Fallow, Simon DLC, Don Rosanna, and Embrin. It's like the 4 of them are just awesome, and we do enjoy working with them. And if you're perfectly fine with me talking about your performances, especially during auditioning or even in the final product, and what I felt you did really strongly, things like that, I am more than happy to, if you're cool with me talking about you, if I do any other videos regarding things that make actors stand out, very happy to include about you and what you do well. And I'd be happy to actually just answer questions about what we actually think of you as a performer. Actually, for Simon DLC, he actually gave me permission and then asked exactly what it was I would say. So I just listed off all the characters he's been cast for and then actually just answered him for each and every one of them. And I could do that, but that also, that would take a lot of time for me because it was like a huge paragraph on each of them, because we actually do pay that much attention to you guys, and we actually do think about your performances in those ways and not just, okay, yeah, this is done. So thank you for bearing with me in my ramblings, and again, any questions, comments, and concerns, just let us know.